A flare is a distress signal. Every person who has ever spent time on a boat knows what a flare means. It means someone is in trouble. It means someone needs help right now. It does not mean anything else. A flare fired from a vessel in the middle of the Sea of Elbow Cay at night is not ambiguous. It is not open to interpretation. It is one of the oldest, most universally understood emergency signals in maritime history. Someone is in distress. Someone is trying to be seen. Brian Hooker told investigators he fired flares from his small 8-foot dinghy after Lynette went overboard. He said he saw several boats come by and used his phone flashlight and flares to try to get their attention. He said it all happened in the water, in the dinghy, far from the sailboat they called home. His account specifically and repeatedly places the flare in the water, not on the Soulmate, not on the 45-foot ketch anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay, not on the boat he told investigators he and Lynette never made it back to. Multiple witnesses on Elbow Cay saw a flare that night. They saw it together. They were in a group, more than 3 people. They all reported the same thing. They all agreed on approximately when they saw it, and what they described to investigative journalist Ashley Banfield, who has been covering this case from the ground in the Bahamas since its earliest days, was not a flare from a small dinghy drifting in the Sea of Elbow Cay. The flare came from the sailboat, from the Soulmate, from the 45-foot ketch that Brian Hooker told investigators he and Lynette never reached. This is the verdict room. We examine the evidence. We follow the facts. And at the end of every investigation, we deliver the verdict. If you are new here, subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. Every week we bring you the forensic depth, the investigative analysis, and the documented record that tells you what is actually known in the cases that matter most. If you are already part of this community, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find this investigation. Now let us talk about what the witnesses saw. What a security camera on a private home a mile away captured at 3 specific times that nobody expected to matter, and why the flare question makes one specific part of Brian Hooker's account impossible to hold together without answering a question that his account cannot answer. Before the flare, before the witnesses, before the camera, we need to establish who this is about. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Onstead, Michigan, and she had given everything to the life she and Brian built at sea, her career, her house, every possession she owned. She and Brian had been sailing together for more than a decade, documenting their life under the name The Sailing Hookers. Sea turtles and sunsets and cinnamon rolls baked in a solar oven aboard the vessel they called Soulmate, their home for 4 years. Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, told the Associated Press that Lynette had been around lakes, boats, sailing, and swimming her entire life. Her daughter Carly told CBS News that Lynette was very fit and strong, a good swimmer who could not simply have fallen off a boat by accident. Lynette's last Instagram post was dated April 4, 2026, the same day she disappeared. The caption read, "Not going anywhere for a while." She had no way of knowing. Now let us build the timeline precisely, because the flare question only works when you understand exactly what Brian Hooker's own account requires to be true about where he was at 8:00 p.m. on the night of April 4, 2026. Brian's account, as he gave it in the 40-minute recorded phone call that CBS News obtained and verified, and as he gave it to police, describes a specific sequence of events. They left the Elbow Cay Inn. They got in the dinghy. Lynette went overboard. He tried to reach her. He drifted. He anchored the dinghy. He yelled for her. He eventually made his way toward Lubber's quarters. He fired a flare. He could not get past the north shore. He paddled. He eventually arrived at the Marsh Harbour boatyard, where he notified someone at approximately 4 in the morning. That sequence, from the moment they left the Elbow Cay Inn dock to the moment the flare was fired, takes time. Each step takes time, and the documented evidence provides a specific starting timestamp for the sequence. Surveillance footage from the Elbow Cay Inn, reviewed by Carly Ellsworth and her boyfriend Steve, shows Brian and Lynette leaving at approximately 6:38 p.m., heading toward the dock. Jim Todd of Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, who went back out on the rescue vessel with Brian the following morning and knows those waters and that route, confirmed that the crossing from the Abaco Inn dock to where the Soulmate was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay takes approximately 15 minutes. If they left the dock at approximately 6:38 p.m. and the crossing takes 15 minutes, the alleged incident would have occurred at approximately 6:53 p.m. Sunset in those waters on April 4, 2026 was at approximately 7:26 p.m. Jim Todd confirmed to Ashley Banfield directly that at 6:38 p.m. it was still complete, full, unambiguous daylight. Daylight that would remain for another 45 minutes to an hour. Now apply Brian's own internal timeline from the Stevenson call. He said the sun set approximately 10 minutes after Lynette went over. He said he threw the anchor. He said he was yelling for her. He said by the time he had the anchor set, he was approximately a quarter to a half mile from her position. He said he eventually made his way toward Luber's quarters. He said he fired a flare. Add those steps together. The attempt to reach Lynette, the anchor being thrown, the drifting, the yelling that continued for some time, the paddling toward Luber's quarters, the decision to fire the flare. By Brian's own internal timeline, following each step he described in the sequence he described them, the flare would have been fired at approximately 8:00 p.m. Let us stay on the timeline precision a moment longer, because the internal arithmetic of Brian's own account is what makes the flare question so analytically significant. The calculation is not complex. It is not built on assumptions or extrapolations from uncertain data. It is built directly on the timestamps that Brian Hooker himself provided in the recorded call to Blaine Stevenson, matched against the physical reality of the geography and the documented time of sunset. Brian said the sun set approximately 10 minutes after Lynette went overboard. If they left the Abaco Inn dock at 6:38 p.m. and the crossing takes 15 minutes, the alleged incident occurred at approximately 6:53 p.m. The sun set in those waters at approximately 7:26 p.m. That is 33 minutes after the alleged incident, not 10 minutes. The 10-minute window Brian described to Blaine Stevenson does not match the documented sunset time for those waters on that date. Jim Todd, who was physically present in that exact area that evening and who has been sailing those waters for years, described what 6:38 p.m. looks like in those waters in early April. Full daylight. Clear. He said you could still get a suntan at that hour. But set that discrepancy aside for a moment and accept Brian's own internal timeline at face value. He said the incident happened approximately 10 minutes before sunset. He said he threw the anchor. He said he was yelling. He said by the time the anchor was set, he was a quarter to half a mile from Lynette's position. He said he was paddling toward Luber's quarters. He said he fired a flare. Each of those steps takes time, minimum 5 to 10 minutes each when you are in a small boat in choppy conditions with a manually deployed anchor and limited paddle power. The cumulative time from the incident to the flare, following Brian's own sequence, puts the flare at approximately 8:00 p.m. That is the same time the witnesses said they saw it. And the witnesses said it came from the Soulmate. Those two facts, Brian's own internal timeline producing a flare at approximately 8:00 p.m. and witnesses placing a flare at approximately 8:00 p.m. from the Soulmate, are not in dispute individually. The dispute is about which vessel the flare came from. Brian says the dinghy. The witnesses say the Soulmate. And the Soulmate, according to Brian's own account, was a boat that no one had been on since he and Lynette left it hours earlier. Multiple witnesses on Elbow Cay told Ashley Banfield they saw a flare at approximately 8:20 p.m. Not from a small dinghy in the water between the Abaco Inn and Aunt Pat's Bay. Not from a vessel drifting south toward Luber's quarters. From the Soulmate. From the 45-foot ketch sitting empty at anchor in Aunt Pat's Bay. The boat that Brian told investigators he and Lynette never reached. The boat that no one was supposed to be on at 8:00 p.m. on the night of April 4, 2026. Ashley Banfield confirmed this publicly through her reporting on the ground. The witnesses were more than 3 people in the same group, all observing the same thing simultaneously, all reporting the same origin point for the flare. They were on land on Elbow Cay, looking out across the Sea of Abaco toward where the Soulmate was anchored. They all saw it. They all agreed on the location. Now hold the witness accounts alongside something that was never placed there for investigative purposes, something that belongs to a man who simply wanted to be able to check his view of the Sea of Abaco from wherever he was in the world. Dean Zamzow has a security camera on his home on Lubber's Quarters. It faces east across the Sea of Abaco toward Elbow Cay, toward the area where the Soulmate was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay on the night of April 4th. The camera runs continuously, recording every second of day and night. Dean shared this footage with Ashley Banfield and her producer Lindsay, who spent approximately 5 hours analyzing every frame. Dean's daughters helped identify reference points on shore that allowed them to estimate where the Soulmate was positioned within the frame. The footage is grainy. The sailboat was approximately a mile away from Dean's camera. This is a genuine limitation of this evidence, and it is stated clearly. Ashley Banfield stated it clearly herself. She cannot say with absolute certainty that what the camera captured is definitively the Soulmate. What she can say, and what she said publicly and on the record, is that based on the reference points identified and the measurements conducted, what appears in the footage at specific timestamps is consistent with the location where the Soulmate was anchored on its anchor chain in Aunt Pat's Bay. At 7:47 p.m. on April 4, 2026, approximately 17 minutes after Brian said he and Lynette left the Abaco Inn dock, approximately 9 minutes before the witnesses saw the flare, the camera captured a light event at the location where the Soulmate was anchored. A significant flash of light, visible from a mile away on a grainy security camera, consistent with what Ashley Banfield described, based on consultation with mariners who examined photographs of the Soulmate's rigging, as automatic security spotlights mounted on the stern of the ketch. Spotlights designed to illuminate the back of the boat when someone approaches from the water. Spotlights consistent with someone arriving at the vessel from the dinghy. 13 minutes after that 7:47 p.m. light event, at approximately 8 p.m., the witnesses on Elbow Cay reported seeing a flare come from the direction of the Soulmate. Then, at 12:27 a.m., on April 5th, hours after Brian says he was adrift in the sea, and hours before he reports reaching Marsh Harbour at approximately 4 in the morning, the same camera captured another light event at the location of the Soulmate. What appeared to be a flashlight moving around in the vicinity of the boat. What appeared to be the stern spotlights activating again, as if something or someone had triggered the motion-sensing security lights on the back of the ketch. 5 minutes later, at 12:32 a.m., another event. Multiple brief flashes consistent with a flashlight moving nearby, the camera catching the beam as it swept in different directions, followed by the stern lights activating again for approximately 53 seconds before going completely dark. Brian Hooker said no one made it back to that boat. That is his documented account to police and to the people he trusted. The 45-foot ketch was supposed to be sitting empty at anchor. No one was supposed to be on it or near it between the time he and Lynette left the Abaco Inn dock and the time he arrived at the Marsh Harbour boatyard before 4 in the morning. The security camera recorded light activity at the location of that supposedly empty boat at 7:47 p.m., 12:27 a.m., and 12:32 a.m. Now the question that cannot be sidestepped. If Brian Hooker was in the water in a small dinghy at approximately 8 p.m., as his account to police and to the Stevensons requires, who fired that flare from the sailboat? There is no version of Brian Hooker's documented account in which the answer to that question is simple. Either someone else was on the boat, a possibility that raises its own questions about who and why, or Brian was on the boat, which contradicts his documented account to investigators, or the witnesses are mistaken about which vessel they saw. Those are the three logical possibilities. The investigation is working to determine which of them is accurate. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorney, Terrell Butler, stated that Brian Hooker categorically and unequivocally denies all wrongdoing and has been cooperating with relevant authorities. His Michigan-based attorney, Crystal Marie Hauer, told ABC News that Brian Hooker never would have harmed his wife of 25 years and asked the public to give him the benefit of the doubt. Brian said publicly after his release that he never harmed Lynette and never would harm Lynette. He is presumed innocent. No verdict exists. All of this is stated clearly and without qualification. But the flare question exists alongside these denials. It cannot be unasked. It is now documented in the public record through Ashley Banfield's on-the-ground reporting through the accounts of more than 3 witnesses who saw the same thing simultaneously and agreed on its origin, and through a security camera that recorded light events at a location that 3 specific timestamps connect to Brian Hooker's own internal timeline of that evening. Dean Zamzow's camera deserves specific analytical attention beyond the timestamps themselves, because what it captures and when it captures, it creates a pattern that is coherent in a specific way. The first event at 7:47 p.m. is consistent with someone arriving at the Soulmate from the dinghy. The stern spotlights on a vessel like the Soulmate are motion activated. They turn on when they detect movement approaching the boat from the water. A light event at the stern at 7:47 p.m. at the location where the Soulmate was anchored is consistent with exactly that scenario. Then, 13 minutes later, the witnesses see a flare from that location. A flare is something you fire from a vessel when you are on it, or when someone is on it who wants to be seen. It is not fired remotely. It requires a person. The events at 12:27 a.m. and 12:32 a.m. are equally specific in their implications. These are not daytime events that could be attributed to normal boat traffic or casual movement around a busy anchorage. This is after midnight, the deep middle of the night in a quiet anchorage in the Bahamas. The sequence at 12:27 a.m. suggests someone moving around the boat with a flashlight, triggering the motion-sensing stern lights. The sequence at 12:32 a.m. multiple brief flashes consistent with a flashlight sweeping in different directions, followed by 53 seconds of stern lights before the boat goes dark, describes a pattern of activity that is not random and is not consistent with environmental factors like waves or ambient light. Brian Hooker's documented account places him adrift in the dinghy at those times, heading toward Marsh Harbour. He was not supposed to be on or near the Soulmate at 12:27 a.m. or 12:32 a.m. No one was supposed to be on or near the Soulmate at those times. The camera captured something at those times. Ashley Banfield has been appropriately careful in stating the limitations of this evidence. The footage is grainy. The boat is a mile away. She cannot say with absolute certainty that it is definitively the Soulmate in the footage. What she can say, and what she did say, publicly and on the record, is that what appears at those timestamps is consistent with the location where the Soulmate was anchored, based on the reference points her team identified through 5 hours of footage analysis with Dean Zamzow's family. That is the evidentiary standard being applied. Consistent with, not proven to be. Consistent with. The investigation holds the full evidence that would allow a definitive assessment. The devices from the boat, the power logs, the digital record of every system that was active on the Soulmate that night. The camera footage is the public-facing piece. The forensic record in investigators' hands is the private one. Now consider the background detail that Ashley Banfield confirmed through sources, former colleagues, and court documents, and which adds a specific layer to the technical picture of this investigation. Brian Hooker worked for AT&T as a telephone repairman and installer. He was, by multiple accounts from people who knew him professionally, technically sophisticated. He understood how phones work. He understood tracking systems. He understood GPS. He understood what creates a digital trace and what does not. And according to sources who spoke to Ashley Banfield, confirmed by court documents, Brian was released from AT&T for allegedly jury-rigging the GPS on his company van to mask his location, to make the van appear to be somewhere it was not, to create a false record of where he was. That documented history of alleged GPS manipulation is now part of the investigative background of a case in which the exact location and movements of a specific person on a specific night are the central factual question. Where was Brian Hooker between 6:38 p.m. and 4 a.m. on the night of April 4th, 2026? His account answers that question one way. The witnesses answer it another. The camera on Lubber's quarters captures events that are inconsistent with the boat sitting empty throughout that window. The investigation holds the Soulmate. It holds the devices seized from the boat under the search warrant reviewed by CBS News. A digital video recorder, digital tablets, and cell phone-related equipment described as material evidence related to a missing person causing bodily harm. It holds the Apple Watch data confirmed by the U.S. Coast Guard in a direct phone call to Lynette's mother, Darlene. It holds Brian's recorded phone calls and text messages. It holds his multiple accounts given in different contexts to different people, with the specific differences between those accounts that investigators have been working through. And on April 25, 2026, TMZ obtained and published video footage of Brian Hooker aboard the Soulmate on April 6th, 2 days after Lynette disappeared and 2 days before his arrest. In the footage, Brian is speaking to a fellow boater from a nearby vessel. The boater offers condolences. Brian, standing on the Soulmate, discusses his anchor. He mentions he may need help with it because he has never brought it up on his own. He does not appear primarily focused on the search for his wife during that documented exchange. He appeared, according to TMZ's reporting, to be mostly focused on getting out of the area. That footage exists in the public record. There is one more detail that connects the flare question to the broader arc of documented inconsistencies in this investigation, and it concerns the question of what Brian did not do. He had a drone on board the Soulmate. This is documented in Lynette's own social media posts. The drone was there. When Brian was brought back to the Soulmate on the morning of April 5th, with fire and rescue personnel and a police officer, the drone was on board. He did not bring it onto the rescue vessel. He did not suggest they fly it. He did not mention it at all. A drone, launched from the deck of the Soulmate or from the rescue vessel, could have been flying over the waters between Elbow Cay and Lubbers Quarters within minutes. In the morning light, with calm conditions, Jim Todd confirmed the water was essentially glass calm on the morning of April 5th when the video from the boater with the camera glasses was recorded. A drone could have covered the entire relevant search area rapidly and visually. The person who knew the drone was on board and who had the capability and the experience to fly it did not mention it to the rescue personnel who spent hours with him that morning trying to find his wife. He also did not, by the accounts of Jim Todd and the other fire and rescue volunteer who spent time with Brian that morning, ask the questions that someone in his situation would instinctively ask. How many boats are out there? Who is coordinating the search? Can I join the search? Where should I go to help? He did not ask to be taken back to the water where he said Lynette went in to search the shoreline from the water. He did not ask for contact information for the Coast Guard or for anyone coordinating the search operation. Jim Todd said directly, he cannot find a single thing Brian did after the incident that he himself would have done in the same situation. The flare that witnesses say came from the Soulmate at 8 p.m. sits alongside the drone that was never mentioned, the anchor that was not deployed immediately, the life jacket that never entered the water, the green cover-up that was never described to search teams, the 52-minute gap in the departure timeline, the 11-hour AIS gap, the 8 to 9 hours before police were notified, the 4 miles that took 8 to 10 hours in conditions that neighboring vessels described as not that bad. Each of these details, examined individually, might be explained. Together they describe a pattern. And the flare question is the piece of that pattern that the witnesses make impossible to resolve without an answer that Brian Hooker's account has not provided. Who was on that boat at 8 p.m.? The investigation is working to answer that question with the full forensic record in its possession. The answer, when it is established, will be definitive. And it will resolve not just the flare question, but every other detail that has accumulated around this investigation since the morning of April 5th, 2026, when Brian Hooker arrived at a boatyard and asked for water and said his wife was in the ocean. Lynette Hooker deserves that answer. The evidence is speaking. The investigation is listening. And the question, who fired that flare from that boat, is not going away. Now step back and look at the complete picture that the flare question places inside. Brian Hooker's account requires a specific physical reality. At approximately 8 p.m. on April 4th, 2026, he was in the water in a small dinghy away from the Soulmate, firing flares from the dinghy, unable to reach the catch, unable to save his wife. Multiple witnesses said they saw a flare at approximately 8 p.m. from the direction of the Soulmate. A camera a mile away captured a light event at the location of the Soulmate at 7:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the witnesses saw the flare. The same camera captured light events at the location of the Soulmate at 12:27 a.m. and 12:32 a.m., at a time when Brian says he was still adrift in the dinghy heading toward Marsh Harbour. And the boat that the witnesses saw the flare come from, the boat that the camera captured light events at, was the 45-foot catch that Brian Hooker said he never made it back to. Who was on that boat? That is the question at the center of what the witnesses saw and what Dean Zamzo's camera captured. It is a question the investigation is working to answer with the physical evidence in its possession, the devices from the sailboat, the Apple Watch data, the digital record of every phone and system that was active on and around the Soulmate on the night of April 4, 2026. Darlene Hamlet is 76 years old and she is in Florida waiting for a phone call that has not come. She told Ashley Banfield, "I just want nothing more than I love you and wish you would have come home." Carly Ellsworth flew to the Bahamas. She walked the shorelines where the cadaver dogs were working. She went to the spot where Brian told investigators Lynette went overboard and said her mother could have swum a couple of feet to shore. She stood at the dock and looked at the Soulmate. She said to no one who could hear her, "Hey Mom, I'm here, wherever you are." Lynette Hooker called the ocean her happy place. She documented a decade of that happiness on a page called The Sailing Hookers. She was 55 years old, fit and strong, and had been swimming since she was a child. She called the 45-foot catch anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay her home. A flare was fired at approximately 8:00 p.m. on the night of April 4, 2026. Multiple witnesses saw it come from the sailboat. A security camera a mile away captured light events at that boat's location at 3 separate timestamps across the night. Brian said he was in the water 4 miles from where it was fired. The investigation continues. All analysis in this video is based on confirmed reporting by investigative journalist Ashley Banfield of Drop Dead Serious, CBS News, ABC News, NBC News, Fox News Digital, Reuters, TMZ, and the Associated Press. The witness accounts and security camera analysis are reported as documented by Ashley Banfield through her on-the-ground reporting in the Bahamas. The security camera footage analysis was stated by Banfield to be consistent with the Soulmate's location based on reference points identified, not a definitive confirmation. All limitations of this evidence have been stated as Banfield herself stated them. The AT&T GPS allegation is presented as reported through sources and court documents as confirmed by Banfield's reporting. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorneys state he categorically and unequivocally denies all wrongdoing. All individuals are presumed innocent unless charged and convicted in a court of law. This video is for informational and analytical purposes only. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, if you were in the waters near Elbow Cay or Aunt Pat's Bay on the night of April 4, 2026, if you saw a flare, if you have footage from that night, contact the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the United States Coast Guard. Both investigations remain active. Anonymous tips can be submitted through the CGIS Tips app. Ashley Banfield at Drop Dead Serious can also be reached at dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com. If this investigation moved you, if this kind of serious, evidence-grounded documentary analysis is what you come here for, subscribe to The Verdict Room right now and hit that notification bell. Every week we examine the evidence, follow the facts, and deliver the verdict. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What does the 8 p.m. flare from the Soulmate tell you? What does the camera capturing 3 separate light events across that night, on a boat that was supposed to be empty, tell you about the question at the center of this investigation? This is The Verdict Room. A flare came from that boat at 8 p.m. Brian said he never made it back. The evidence has spoken. One final observation about the witness accounts themselves, because how those witnesses came to share what they saw matters to understanding the evidentiary weight of their accounts. These witnesses were not sought out by investigators as part of a formal canvassing operation on the first morning after Lynette disappeared. They came forward through the organic process of a community following a case that was unfolding around them. They were on Elbow Cay. They saw something. And when Ashley Banfield was on the ground in the Bahamas and began asking questions of the people who lived and worked and moved through those waters on that night, they told her what they had seen. More than 3 people in the same group, observing the same event simultaneously, all agreeing on when they saw it and where they saw it come from. That kind of witness account, multiple independent observers from the same location, without any coordination between them, all describing the same thing. is precisely the type of testimony that investigators treat as significant. It is not one person with a disputed recollection. It is a group of people who all looked at the same thing at the same time and all described it the same way. The flare came from the Soulmate. The camera on Lubber's quarters captured light events at the Soulmate's estimated location at 7:47 p.m., 12:27 a.m., and 12:32 a.m. Brian Hooker's account says no one was on that boat. The witnesses and the camera say something was happening at that boat across that entire night. The investigation holds the technical record of what the Soulmate systems documented. The power logs, the device connection events, the digital record of every electronic system that was active on that vessel during the night of April 4th and the early morning of April 5th. When that forensic record is laid alongside the witness accounts and the security camera timestamps, one of two things will emerge. Either Brian's account is consistent with everything the forensic record shows, or it is not. There is no in-between. The forensic record is not subject to the uncertainty that makes witness testimony complex. It is a log. It either shows activity consistent with someone being on board during those windows, or it shows the flat, steady drain of an empty boat sitting at anchor overnight. The investigation is working through exactly that question. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. The ocean was her happy place. She was fit and strong and had been swimming since childhood. The 45-foot catch in Aunt Pat's Bay was her home. A flare came from that home at 8 p.m. On the night she disappeared, Brian said he never made it back. The evidence has spoken.